LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Welcome to all of you watching. Very excited to have our guest today. We're going to talk about interpreters and language skills in foreign countries. So before we get that going, I want to get Carlos to introduce the show, and let's have some fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tulio, as ever. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Dojo Live. Today, it's Wednesday, the 20th of November, and in Dojo Live, as you probably know, we're co-creating the future of workplace diversity by sharing and learning the experiences of tech luminaries and tech business leaders. So, my name is Carlos Ponce, broadcasting live from Mexico City, and so, as well, Tulio introduced himself and my fellow teammate. And also, I'd like to mention that we also have my fellow teammate, Laura Fimbres, co-host in training. So she's going to be around every now and then, asking great questions. Today, we're going to be talking about 5G interpretation. And in other words, well, in a world where technology is improving at the speed of light, leading us to the era of 5G, what are the skills interpreters need to improve and focus on in order to make a difference? And here to tell us all about it and to share her story is Alessandra Campana, the founder of Inlingo, a language company that does a little bit of out of the ordinary. So Alessandra, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Well, it's an honor for me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really humbled by the invitation among all these tech luminaries.
Yeah.
Really humbled.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Alessandra. So, first of all, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, tell us and the audience, of course, tell us a little bit about you, and also, of course, about Inlingo. Let's start with that.
Of course. Well, I learned English as a kid. I grew up in Gaeta, which is a little jewel of a town on the coast of Italy between Rome and Naples, and where there's an American military base. So I had American neighbors ever since I was a kid. Now, I stepped up in my game when I was a teenager. I met this girl who was still one of my best friends. And I learned English from her. I improved my English with her. She never learned Italian, but I definitely improved my English, so much so that during that time I was in classical high school. I don't know if you know that in Italy, you can already choose a path when you go to high school. I was doing classical high school. You do a lot of Latin, a lot of Greek, ancient Greek. And it helped me a lot. But then after 2 years, I was like, no, I like English. I like live languages. So I changed high school. I went to a linguistic high school. Now, in order not to start over from the first year, I had to learn French during that summer because I had to have a test and seeing what year they were going to put me in. And I basically learned French in 1 month. At that point, I realized that I kind of had a ear for languages. I tend to kind of mimic the person that I speak with. If I speak for a long time with somebody that stutters, for example, I'll be doing that too, unconsciously. My mom used to tell me all the time, she would know exactly who was on the other side of the phone after 1 minute that I speak with them, because I would just start taking the way of speaking. And then me and my family, we eventually moved to Rome. I wanted to go to school for interpreters and translators right then and there. Unfortunately, is a private school and it was very expensive. So I went to university, which is in Italy is public. So I did 2 years of sociology, which is another subject that I love a lot. Cultures, it has a lot to do with sociology. And then after that, things got better for my family, and I was finally able to enroll in the School for Interpreters and Translators. I did there 4 full years of intensive training, simultaneous interpretation, the whole 9, note-taking, translation, everything that is to do in order to become a professional interpreter and translator, at least in Europe. So when I finally moved over here in the United States, I'm in Georgia, I realized that our profession was not taken too much seriously as much as it is in Europe, meaning that I noticed that a lot of people who were defining themselves interpreters and translators were simply bilingual people, which there's nothing wrong. I mean, being bilingual is great. It's a great advantage. It opens plenty of doors. But being a professional interpreter and a translator is a totally different thing. Now, I always do this parallel, like, you know how tall people, they're always destined to play basketball, at least one time. And even if maybe they're not into sports or things like that, they just try just because they're tall. So just because you're bilingual doesn't mean that you can be a good interpreter and translator. It takes
Absolutely.
Certain skills and above all, passion. So when
Alessandra, we have something in common. I grew up 60 kilometers from the Air Force base of Sigonella in Sicily. And we should probably do this interview in Italian just to confuse people even further.
Va bene, perfetto.
Intervista in italiano per tutti gli altri che ascoltano, peccato.
Pazienza. Okay.
So tell us a little bit about Inlingo. Tell us about the company.
Yes. So after a few years, when I realized what the tendencies were here about our profession, I finally decided. I had a long career as an interpreter over the phone, mainly because, as we know, Italian is not as requested as, of course, Spanish here in the United States. So I had to work from home over the phone and eventually also video. And then I decided to open my own company. And the reason being is that I wanted to try and fix what I was seeing that was wrong about this type of remote interpretation. Every time I talk to other people or I go to hospitals, for example, where they use remote interpretation a lot, every time they talk about the company that they use for remote interpretation, they always like, okay, remote interpretation. So I said, you know what? A lot of us interpreters, because we don't speak Spanish, but we speak other languages, we do have to work remotely. And I wanted to try and improve it. So basically, Inlingo is all about quality. So quality versus quantity, of course. And by quality, I don't only mean the fact that, of course, the interpreters and translators have to be trained and certified, but that spark. I need that spark. I need that passion. You know, that characteristic that you can see in people when they love what they do. And that's very, very important to me. So not only that, but of course, the interpreters, the number two thing of Inlingo is that the interpreters are well compensated for what they do, things that doesn't happen often, unfortunately. And then create a personal rapport. So try to avoid as much as possible the impersonal experience of a call center. So I tend to, what I like to do is for every client to build their own personal team of interpreters and translators so that they can create a rapport with them. They can create a relationship, and that's so important today.
So, Alessandra, how does technology or the upcoming of 5G, because it's one of the topics.
Exactly.
How does that change the landscape of translators in the world today?
Yes.
But before we answer that question, I'm curious.
Yes.
What are the top requested languages?
Well, worldwide or in the United States, because they vary depending.
Well, I'm just curious. Where are most of the requests? Is it English people from the States going to foreign countries, or is it foreigners coming here? I'm curious what the mix looks like.
Well, that's a long conversation. It's well, of course, if you work here in the United States as an interpreter, then you will have foreigners coming into the country for different reasons. It can be, for example, I can tell you my experience. I know the Italians, they come on vacation, or that Italians, for example, the experience that I have that was beautiful for me was that a lot of calls were from the New Jersey area, where there's a lot of immigrants from Italy from the old days, and they're people of age that kind of forgot Italian and then never really learned English. So they created their own little language. They would Italianize American words and Americanize Italian words. And that was another learning process for me. And
but in general, what's the top languages?
I would say Spanish,
English. I mean, I'm assuming probably
Yes, well,
Yeah.
English is mostly is spoken almost everywhere you go. You always find, and I always my American friends in Italy saying everywhere we go we're spoiled because there's always somebody that
Oh,
speaks English.
right,
So but Spanish, I would say definitely Spanish.
right. And
Yeah.
so, are most of your customers multilingual? I mean, multicultural companies that have international locations? Are they executives? Who are your typical customers?
Yes, there. Sounds like a joke. There's a company. One of my favorite clients is, there's one representative in Italy, one here in the United States, and one in China. And so I have to deal and help with understanding not only the conversation that they help interpret during the conference calls that we do, but also the cultural aspect behind it. Like just to give you a little hint, a little example,
Mhm.
whenever the representative from China has to intervene, it's his turn to speak and say what he has on his mind. He always wastes those few extra seconds to talk. And it leaves like those awkward moments where like, okay, did he hear the question? Is he following, or he got distracted? But no, it's simply a way they have of doing things. They think that we talk one upon each other. So that we talk too much, that we interrupt. So they have the habit, and for them it's just politeness, to wait those few extra seconds and make sure that everybody said what they had to say before they start speaking. And that's, one little thing that can be interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and
Yeah.
this is from China. So
Yeah.
culturally speaking, the habit is you wait before you respond because it's a
Right.
respectful.
Yes.
That probably wouldn't go very well in Italy or most of the Western world.
Right. But
So,
as long as as long as you
yeah.
prepared, and that's another thing that Inlingo does. Not
But-
only we provide interpretation and translation,
Okay,
but
so
we help in this process.
okay, which is great. So if I'm a CEO of a company, I'm going to visit people in China.
Exactly.
I certainly want. So part of the service is not just translating what I need, but also helping me understand. Give yourself a quick pause for 5 seconds
Absolutely.
before you speak. But
Right.
that also means that culture tends to also stop talking, right? To give the other. Is that also, does it work that way too, or I mean, how do you deal with someone's just going on and on and on?
Well, of course, let's say, for example, you are this multinational company and you want a new distributor. We're talking about China. Let's say China. You go there, you have your presentation, you have a meeting. So first off, what Inlingo does is said, okay, let me look at your presentation. Let me make sure that what you're pitching to them is relevant to their culture. Maybe you're focusing on an aspect of your business that for them is, it's important, but not that much. And maybe there's another aspect of your business that for them is very relevant. So you need to have this consultation with somebody that know the culture and try to lead you in the right direction, gives you all the do's and don'ts, all the things that you could expect. And then, of course, always taking into consideration the fact that they know you're there, you're American, and you have, certain American ways of doing things, and that would be, accepted. But if you want to create a good relationship, the effort that you put into trying and understand their culture and embrace their culture will be extremely appreciated. Extremely appreciated.
Okay, so is that the extra step when you talked about, we're unusual because we're not just doing translation? Is that the extra?
Not only, no, not only that. That's one aspect. A different service that we offer. Actually, right now we're developing our own app for simultaneous interpretation because we offer up to 300 people conference calls with interpretation, simultaneous interpretation included. Now, another aspect of the business is creating this, because we're talking about remote interpretation. Now, remote interpretation here in the United States is mostly used in healthcare. healthcare, so big hospitals that need access to interpreters 24/7, all the time. So that's what I'm trying to focus on, because again, here in Atlanta, there's a lot of people that I know that work in this hospital as in-person interpreters, a lot of people that work at, higher level in departments of interpretation and translation, and I hear their complaints. So that's why I'm trying to build something that is more personal than the average call center, where again, they tend to hire people that are simply bilingual. They're not well trained, and also add more. And this is where we come to talk about technology. I remember in one of your interviews here on Dojo, you said, what does it matter really what the frame of our screens look like? What matters is the people in it, and what is being discussed and what we talk about. That's what was really important about Dojo Live, and the same thing there. So you have to, yes, I do have the software or the application where you can access video interpreters, but how is that video interpreter going to appear to you? So what I do, I train my interpreters to be a little bit better. We know that nowadays a digital image is very important. So we work on that a lot. A lot of interpreters went from being over the phone interpreter, and then little by little they were driven towards, by their own company, driven towards video interpretation, but it kind of kept on looking the same, meaning, it's I'm working from home, I'm over the phone, nobody can see me, so I don't take too much care. I just to get too comfortable. I don't get too much care of my aspect or of what my background looks like. So that's it.
Alessandra Antulio, there's something that I would like to ask you. Yeah. That kind of leads me to today's topic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm going to ask this question and then pass it on to Laura. She might have a couple of others. So what are the skills? I mean, you mentioned this in the tagline. What are the skills that interpreters need to improve?
Right.
Work on in order to make a difference? And what kind of difference are you talking about?
Well, first of all, again, like I said at the beginning, there interpreters and translators need. Well, we're talking mostly interpreters now with technology. They need to have certain skills that go beyond the simple translation of words. Communication, we've seen studies that communication is 55% body language, 38% tone, and just a little 7% words. So as interpreters, we need to transmit certain feelings to the people that see us. A lot of interpreters that tend to do, for example, consecutive interpretation, which is taking notes or looking down instead of up at the camera. And that's not a good experience. A lot of interpreters, they just tend to overlook their whole aspect. Again, background, their own person. You can transmit certain feelings even through video, through body language. Right. Body language is very important. Like, for example, me as an Italian, I'm talking in my hands all the time. And for example, for over the phone interpretation, unfortunately, there's only so much you can do. For me, for example, as an Italian, if you take out the video aspect of it, it's like if you tie my hands behind my back right now, I will barely be able to continue talking. But with the video, there's so much more than you can do. Usually in the healthcare industry, for example, you have to show compassion. You have to show that you care, that you're there. So there are certain things that you can do with your body that will make the person feel that way. Or detachment. If you're in the legal interpretation or with business, you have to show detachment. So there are a lot of things that can be learned, and not only that you can work on yourself, but that you can see with others. If you know body language, you understand. And in a business meeting, I'll be able to say, in chat, like, in chat, he's saying, yes, you're explaining this, but he does not look like is very interested in what you're saying right now. So maybe change subject, or, you know, there's a lot.
That kind of answers a question that was rolling in my head about.
Yes.
I was in Russia in April, and I was using Google Translator, which is like a good way to quickly talk into it and have talk to the other person. But it's very impersonal, and it's like a machine, right? So
yeah,
I was curious about the application of how you work and how technology comes into play. So how does that work? If I in healthcare, I go to a hospital and I need a translator, do they use their phone and do a video call? How do you provide the service today?
It depends.
In today's tech, format, if you will.
Absolutely. First of all, let me correct you. Interpreters, not translator. Translator writes. The interpreters speak. We're very keen on that. But what happens is, okay, you're at the hospital, you only speak Italian. Guess what happened? They will see if there's a nurse. Usually there are tablets on nurses' stations. If there's one available to them right then and there, depending on how urgent is the matter, they can just click. It's an application. They can just click, select the language, and they reach the video interpreter. If that's not possible, they reach a phone, so they can dial a number where they can speak with the interpreter. Or, for example, let's say you are in a situation where you're a female, okay, and you hurt yourself really bad, or you were a victim of violence. You may not want to be able to be seen, so you don't want the video option, but you can ask the patient if they want video or audio only, and they can also select either male or female interpreter. So that's how it happens.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's your focus, is the healthcare space. Is that it?
No, not really. No, okay. It's not the healthcare. Healthcare, yes, absolutely. There's a need for companies that do the work in a different way. But also business. I love the business part of it. I love to be able to add that know-how, be able to explain. For example, of course, for as far as I'm concerned, is for Italy. If anybody that has to do business with Italy, I'm the person to go to. Of course, I have other colleagues that do the same. I love that aspect. I love to be able to guide, for example, an American company to do business in Italy the proper way, the right way. We all know that, the first impression is what matters. We have apparently 7 seconds to give a good impression. So if you go there, sometimes people think that Americans are a little arrogant. They think that everywhere they go, they can just be themselves and they're right. It's not like that. No.
Okay.
But the thing is, if they see you make this much effort, they
right. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is the value that has in terms of being able to build trust? For example, if you're an executive traveling to another country,
right,
and you want to reach your audience, not just with the words, but actually convey feeling and convey emotion.
Right.
Which, what I'm hearing, is part of the interpreter's job is to not just convey words, but also convey them in a way that the people receiving those words can relate within their confined, a proper way to do things in that culture. So,
right,
in your experience, how far does that go in being able to build trust, for example, with employees, where someone's come in and taken the extra step to not just be heard, but actually be felt?
Well, you have, again, you have to try to understand the culture. I'll give you an example. And again, I can only give you examples for Italy more in depth, because that's my area of specialties. Of course, other interpreters for other languages will be able to give you more precise answers for their country of origin. I have a client that has been communicating using Google Translate, and one day he sent me this email. He's all frustrated, saying, okay, I have this client in Italy. He's not responding. Why is he not responding? Can you please make sure that this is translated correctly? And I said, it's not the translation that much. is how you put the translation together, meaning most Mediterranean cultures especially, when other cultures as well, South America, I'm assuming as well, they give to the personal factor more importance than business. So you cannot start an email talking about strictly business. If you haven't heard from them in a while, you talk, this guy had this much business, this much small talk, and then the conclusion with the recap of what he needed. So I said, you just have to change it around. Do this much small talk and ask about a family, because you know each other. You met, your families met, and they came over here, you went over there. So ask more about that, and then in closing your email, just mention what is really the email is about, and that will not give you the chance to have to recap, because the last thing that you mentioned is business. So yeah.
Great. Alessandra, we're coming up on time, but I do want to give our co-host in training, Laura, a chance to ask.
Yes.
She does have a question for you. So Ruben, if you can patch her through and have her ask the question, that'd be great. Ruben went to lunch. Okay, well.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Just have Laura ask her question. She has a question for Alessandra.
Hi, Alessandra.
Hi.
Hi. Just one question came up to my mind. Have you ever considered adding ASL to Inlingo? Is that a possibility?
Oh yes. It's there. It's there. Absolutely.
Nice.
Yes. And one thing, for many, many years, I was convinced that sign language was universal, which is not, of course. And then now I understand why. But also, sign language, we were talking about body language. Even body language is different from country to country. So that's also a very interesting aspect.
Can we do both? Like if I went somewhere and I had an interpreter, could I have two? One that's actually interpreting in language and then one that's doing sign language? Or is that possible today?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, yes.
Great. Well, we're up on time. So if anybody wants to add that personal touch, be able to offer a little bit more than just interpreting words, actually to perhaps interpret intention within the recipient's framework on how they receive the information, they should definitely reach out to you because you're providing that service. We'll make sure to put it on the landing page of the show. Any other questions? Otherwise, thank you for being with us. We're on time.
Yeah. Just to wrap it up real quick, the technology is awesome, and I love. I'm a technology freak, really, and but it's simply a tool. I think that going forward, going into the 5G and artificial intelligence and all this, people will start being more and more important instead of less and less. Some people, I think they have a misconception on that. The human insight is going to become more and more important.
Well, thanks for being with us. I think those were very wise words.
Thank you so much. It was very much fun, and it was great spending this time with you all.
Great. Carlos, who do we have next week, right before Thanksgiving? Want to announce the next week's show? We can't hear you.
Yeah, you're just moving.
Do you have an interpreter when someone's on mute?
I don't know. Whatever. I don't know sign language, but anyway. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me see too. Well, next week we're going to be speaking with Tal Shalit. I hope I got that right. He is the CEO of BetterRest. That's a tech company. And we're going to be speaking about reimagining mobility and accessibility across regions. So that's for next week, folks. Right here on Dojo Live, same time, same venue. We look forward to having you here. And Alessandra, the only thing left for me to do is, as usual, send out a big, heartfelt, warm thank you to you for being with us. Right? Thank you. And folks, just so that you know, I'm also going to be part of Alessandra's team of collaborators, hopefully in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tullio, anche tu, anche tu.
Io,
Ma sì, perché no?
Yeah, there you go. So, Alessandra, it was a pleasure to have you here, and I want to thank my fellow teammates, Tulio Siragusa in Los Angeles, and of course, our co-host in training, Laura Fimbres, in our Hermosillo office. Thank you both, big time.
Thank you.
And see you next time, folks. Thank you for watching
Bye.
Dojo Live.
Bye. Thank you.